Recording. Great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. This is info session for NOFA 2023-3 for Lyft and Lyft homeownership and the homeownership development incubator program. And I know you all have submitted pre-applications, so you're in the right space. Today, we'll take some time to answer. We'll mostly just open it up to you if you have any questions, but I'm just going to go through a few updates and a quick reminder of the application process. We also had a request to open up a small discussion on pre-development and capacity building grants, like a peer discussion. So if folks want to stick around at the end, once we're done with questions for that, if there's time, we plan on doing that if you're interested. And I guess I didn't say my name, but I know most of you. I'm Talia Concrevis, and I'm joined by Elizabeth Thomas. So we're here to do our best to answer your questions today and record them and answer them later if we can't answer them now. So just a quick reminder of everything related to this NOFA, because there's a lot of different parts, and sorry for all of you who have a very firm understanding of all of this, but just wanted to remind everybody that the NOFA page, we're constantly updating it. So we usually aim to update it on Fridays, but we updated it on Monday this week rather than last Friday. So there's been a small addendum to the NOFA as of Monday, just clarifying that we will allow vertical construction once you've received your award but have not closed on the award. These are for the development projects specifically, not necessarily related to the pre-development and capacity building grants, but we will allow for vertical construction at your own risk for Lyft and for development subsidies. And so that was the change on Monday. You all probably saw that the deadlines have been extended. So for most applicants, the deadline is extended to March 3rd. And the last day to submit questions is Valentine's Day, February 14th. And then, oh, sorry, that was the past one. It's February 24th now. And then for the set-aside grants for federally recognized tribe applicants, the deadline is March 17th, and the last day to submit questions is March 15th. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And we have also updated the FAQs as of Monday. There's been a lot of great questions coming through our mailbox, ho.development@hcs.oregon.gov. So keep them coming our way. You're noticing things that we hadn't noticed before and have some good questions. So we're trying to reflect that in the FAQs. And then just a quick reminder of the application process. For all applicants, you'll be using the Smartsheet link to, and it's not necessarily loading right now. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's not the view that you should see. Well, this is the editing view, but you're all using this Smartsheet form for your narrative answers. The Smartsheet form will populate questions based on what you were applying for. So just be aware of that and make sure you're applying for the right funds, because then it will populate the right questions for you to answer. And then for pre-development and capacity building grant applicants and other tribal homeownership project applicants, you can use your Procorum Work Center to upload your project budget. And okay, that's not the right view at all, but you get the point. To upload your project budget and financial audits or statements. And then for Lyft, development subsidy and tribal homeownership development applicants, so basically anybody doing a construction project, you will also be completing the Excel workbook. That's posted to the NOFA page under application materials. It's also in your Procorum Work Center, and then you'll also be using your Procorum Work Center to upload all the supplemental documents required in the application. And so I just wanted to, can you all see this Excel sheet? Or did it not switch? Okay. So this Excel sheet on the second to last tab, it has a checklist of all the forms that you'll be required to upload. This is just for construction projects, not for the other projects that do not.
Can you show us that, Talia?
Can you see it?
You
can't see the Excel? Oh,
it's
okay.
Just the Q&A right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is,
okay.
You see it now. This is the second to last tab of the Excel workbook, and that's the checklist of everything that you should be submitting along with your application, with some just notes on what makes sense. And so just a few questions have come in this week from those that have submitted for LIFT in the past. And I just want to note, we're not requiring the same zoning form as we have in the past. You're just, checking a box attesting that you have the proper zoning or have submitted for it. You can submit evidence if you have something tangible to submit for the zoning. And also someone this morning pointed out that the language on our site review checklist says that the phase 1 can be no older than 6 months. That's incorrect. I think as of last year, we changed it to it can be no more than 12 months old. So just note that you have a little bit more leeway with the age of your phase 1 report. And the phase 1 is not required at application. It's just required by closing if you have a project that is over 4 units. So just wanted to clarify that because that hasn't been updated on our site. And then just to preempt a few other questions, and Diane, do you have a question about that one?
Oh, not about that one. Go ahead. You might address what I've got.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just to preempt a few other questions, let me just do another share. Yeah, I just wanted to show some key questions that have come in a couple times through our inbox. So this is the FAQs that are posted to the NOFA site. And I just wanted to point out, we have an example here of how to calculate the LIFT supplemental grant amount. So I take a look at that. And then just also, we've gotten a few, I know the pre-development and capacity building grant uses might not be as clear as everybody would like. I just really want to emphasize this answer, that the grants are meant to support small and emerging developers prepare to get a development project off the ground in the future, and apply for OHCS development funding. So the grants are meant to support projects seeking to better center and outreach to the communities they are seeking to serve, particularly communities of color. So just, pay attention to those priorities as you're thinking about what those grants may be used for. Just one more clarification, because we've gotten this a few times. There's a question, can I apply for funding for a LIFT project that has already received a LIFT reservation? And the answer is no. If you've already received funding for a project, for 10 units, you can't use the LIFT or LIFT supplemental to add additional funding into that same 10 units. It could be a part 2 to that project where you're proposing an additional 10 units or something, but it can't go to that same project that has already received funding. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of those questions because we've gotten a bunch of, a lot of people are wondering about those, but now I will just open it up to any questions that folks have on the line.
So I did have a question about the bully prevailing wage determination process, because I've done that. I did that later in the process with the app, the project Elizabeth and I are working on in Medford for the closing of the loan. But for this project, do you want us to have the letters sent to bully asking for the determination before we submit?
Elizabeth, would you be able to answer that one?
I think that one can come after you get your reservation as well. So in the same category as a phase one, it would be helpful to send it as you know, as you're applying this, go ahead and send to bully, because I don't know how long it's taking. Some partners, it's taking a little bit of time. So if you're going to want to close quickly, but no, you can do that after you receive your reservation.
Okay, good to know. I might just do the two that we've already got ready to go, but there might be a third through a partnership that is not ready. This is a general overarching question. Just came up in a conversation with this the Habitat team I was just talking to. Is there any conversation about having a possible rolling deadline for LIFT grants in the future? I know there was a kind of session timing, and the other big question on my mind too is, are you guys planning to release all the projects that did apply for through the pre-application process? Are we going to be able to see the list of all the projects that were applied for?
Yeah, so we did release, I'll answer your first one first, your last question first. We did release a high-level summary of all the projects that applied. So that's up on the NOFA page. It doesn't, it's mostly a summary of amounts and number of applications. We don't have a summary of a list of all the applicants. There were a lot of applicants, and we don't expect all the pre-applications to result in full applications. So just if you're looking at the numbers, I would strongly, urge you to not be intimidated by the numbers, because I don't think that all of them will turn into, the competition won't be as fierce as it looks right now. Yeah, we did have a lot of applicants, so we thought it was just simpler to do the high level rather than show kind of this detailed, really long list.
It could help inform whether or not we step into a partnership for yet another one that did get a pre-app in. It's just a question of, do we go through all this work now? If that, and I know the set asides are soft, but do you have, I'll look at it, but does it also say how many projects and how much money was asked for in each of the urban, suburban, and then rural?
Yeah, we did list number of applications. Here, I can just share my screen, but I did get a question earlier today asking for that breakdown of amount for each set aside. So we can do that for LIFT, and that we could do a more detailed breakdown of the amounts requested for LIFT and development subsidies. I don't think we would do that for the other ones since they don't have set asides, if that's helpful.
That would be really helpful, because again, if it's just completely overwhelmed, that could make a difference to us. But again, when you say soft set asides, is the goal to really kind of try to cover as many projects that are viable, ready to go, appropriate, no matter what category they end up landing in. But we know the intent is to try to get projects done in the rural areas as a priority.
Yeah, I mean, so the set asides, we were really pleased to see that there are a lot of rural applications. I think this is more rural applications than we've ever received for LIFT, obviously, because that's the only one we've done before. So, and we do have that 50% set aside for rural applicants. So those applicants will be reviewed in a pool together. And then if there is, if there are viable projects and not enough funds, then we'll look to, there's very few mid-sized urban. So I'm assuming that some of that money will go towards rural and urban projects. So just, yeah, we will do our best to fund every viable project that we can.
Yeah, and because mid-size urban did not include any of the suburban areas in the urban growth boundary, those fell into urban. That's an area where, you know, if a project's in a suburban area, then yeah, that definition did limit where projects landed.
Got it. That's helpful to know. And then you asked, is there a rolling deadline for
It's just an
lift grant?
overarching question.
Yeah. That's not something that we've discussed. You're talking about specifically for lift, just like the general lift funding, not the
Yeah,
supplemental.
because it is that has been made possible for the wildfire survivors focused lift. And why couldn't it be considered for this? Because when projects are ready, they're ready. And sometimes they don't get ready, or they fall out of being ready by the time the next round comes through. So having a ramp, you know, having an ability to apply as the projects become ready, you know,
Yeah,
could make a huge difference.
yeah, that's not something we've considered yet, but that's just because we're new to, you know, having you know, ownership over this program. So it doesn't mean we can't take that suggestion to heart for the future. So you know, if we forget about it, would urge you to ask us about it again.
I will.
But I've written it down, and we can
Thank you.
think about what
Yeah.
that might look like.
Yeah, if this goes great and we could do rolling applications, we're going to build more units, and it's going to happen more smoothly, because now we're having to jam everything into this short window of time and try to get, you know, everything put together.
Yeah.
It doesn't work as well for development. I'm going to shut up now.
Go for it, Tina.
Okay, I had a question. When I did the pre-application, I didn't check the HDIP box. I just did the pre-development and capacity building grants. Is there a way to also apply for that if you didn't do that on the pre-application?
Let us get back to you about that. I think
Okay.
we do have flexibility. If you want to just follow up with the email, HO.development, and just give us kind of a little bit of information about what you'd be applying for, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. This is Jeff Petrillo. If you put in a certain, this is related to pre-development, set aside if you put it in a dollar amount for what you were intending to apply, and it's in the pre-app, and in terms of what you're requesting, and if it's lower or higher I mean, it can be higher or lower, correct, in the final app?
Yeah. If that changes, it's fine. We're just asking to get an estimate of what this might look like, but we know that you'll be solidifying exactly what your project is and costs. So if that number changes.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, hi, this is Adam Briggs. I've got a question for the group and also for you, Talia. I was curious for the LIFT funding, and you know, it's stated that it has to be an equity model for the development condo. I thought I read that manufactured home park as well meets that. So I wondering if it's any deed ownership that has fractional ownership of common areas of the property, which is really the determining factor. Like you know, townhomes, often people share common interest in common areas, and we also down here in Curry County we have several what they call PUDs, public utility developments. There too you have single family residences that stand on their own footings. I think the owner owns the foundation right to the earth below it, but there are shared common areas where there are gardens and paths and walkways and whatnot. So they do have in their deed fractional ownership of those spaces. Would that be a qualifying equity model? What is it technically about the equity ownership when it comes down to the deed? What is qualifying and what would not be qualifying?
Yeah, I can start answering, but maybe Diane or Sarah, if you want to kind of chime in about your model. But it has to be a CLT or a co-op. It has to be a model where the organization is managing the long-term affordability of the property. So they own the ground underneath the property, and the home buyer owns the home or unit. So it couldn't necessarily be just shared, amenities outside or around the unit. It has to be a fully shared equity model. And that's really because the state also needs to have a shared interest in the property because of the nature of the funding that we're using. It's the Article 11Q bonds are mostly meant for, in our Constitution, are meant for infrastructure projects, for state infrastructure. And so for it to work for housing, the state has to maintain an interest in the home as kind of a form of infrastructure that the state has invested in.
Okay, so it sounds like the ownership, the land is what is excluded in the ownership model. I understand that there's got to be a managing entity that controls the affordability over a period of time, but I was just trying to get a handle on what types of housing might be in addition to condos or mobile home parks.
There could be, I'll add to that in some of the projects. So the security documents that we take with the lift will be on the land that the homes are on. And we do have sometimes that there's common areas or there'll be a private street or something. If the land that the homes are on appraises at a sufficient value to cover the lift loan amount, then we will just take those parcels that the homes are on as security. So we wouldn't necessarily need to take a common area or a private street as security. So if you're talking about the common areas that are, say, jointly owned, we may not need to take that as security. So that may be an acceptable use of it, but it is the land that the homes are on that we're most interested in.
You're talking about placing a lien first.
Correct.
Okay,
So yeah,
right.
placing our liens we'll because the appraised value of the land that the homes are on is what we're going to look at, not necessarily the common areas. There's more to that when you get to underwriting. Of course, you have to have your subdivision plat recorded so that we have the legal descriptions of all those various parcels for the homes so that we can properly record that interest. But we may be able to exclude from the state's lien those common areas.
Thank you for that explanation. And I just was curious if anybody in the group might speak to what is it that makes an organization that's applying for the funding choose LIFT versus the development route, aside from how much money might be in either pot. How is it that determination is made, or if that's not appropriate?
No,
if it's not
Adam,
appropriate to ask, then we can save it
yeah,
for
no,
later.
Adam, for us, it's in order to satisfy the lift loan over the 40 year beyond, you got to have permanent affordability. So and that's why we would go for that, because we're community land trust. Other agencies want to be able to do full equity and have they'd be applying for the development subsidies at, I think it's 80 to 100% of median income, and that's a different model. And there's a lot of issues around how to be sure that your homes are both either in a condominium structure or a subdivision or single family fee simple homes. I mean, that's there's a bunch of state law around that. You can't have common spaces that aren't managed in some way, shape, or form. It's seriously problematic for the long haul. And because we're in the home ownership business for as long as, well, for as long as the home's in portfolio, which is forever, we're deeply concerned about how that's managed in the long haul.
Yeah, I can chime in a little, although one of my colleagues who's not here could probably speak more clearly to this, but when we're talking to, and I'm with Habitat, Adam, I know we've spoken in the past, the different Habitat affiliates, when they're deciding whether to apply for the LIFT model, or in this case, the homeownership development funding, some of those conversations that I've been in have also involved, understanding the benefits of the shared equity model. Like Diane said, like, when that owner sells that house, it's 100% going to be sold again at an affordable price to another lower income home buyer. So, I mean, philosophically, I guess, you're talking about establishing a community where those eligible home buyers will be able to buy a home that they otherwise probably would never be able to buy. So if that's helpful, and we can talk a little more offline too.
I just want to address the question from Adina for zoning change requests. Can that be submitted after reservation and prior to home closing? If zoning change is in the process at the time of application, but zone change and home development will be accomplished within the grant timeframe, is that acceptable for HDIP funds? We are requiring that the zoning change has to be requested, at least requested by application, because that can take a long time, and we want to see that that's in process. So it either needs to be in place or requested by the time you submit. There are other questions? Oh, okay.
I have a question about one of the timeliness requirements. In the NOFA and Exhibit B, the scoring criteria, it says that the project has to be able to be under construction in 12 months. Is that like basically like permit ready in 12 months, or fully have the permits and be ready for construction at that point?
Elizabeth, do you want to speak to that process a little bit?
Well, for the LIFT loans, they need to be completely constructed within 36 months of the date of your reservation letter, which for this round, you'd get your reservation letter sometime in the summer. So let's say it's June of 23, then you'd have till June of 26 to complete your project. Or actually, we write it so that you have towards the end of that year to get it done. But for LIFT, it's a 36-month timeline. Talia, I don't know about the other ones, what we've done, the other timelines we've had.
Same timeline, but are there specific things that you do, have done for LIFT? Because we'll probably be modeling the HDIP on that. Are you monitoring that projects have reached a certain build ready threshold within 12 months, or how does that work?
No, I don't monitor that. So I monitor that 36-month timeline.
So if you do get awarded for HDIP or LIFT, you'll be submitting monthly progress reports to just tell us how things are going.
I do, well, yeah, we do monthly progress reports, and you do tell me what percentage is complete of both site development and construction of the homes. But I don't have a 12-month threshold. I have the 36-month threshold only for that requirement. I don't know if I'm not answering the question.
Yeah, well, that's what I was mostly seeing for the development subsidy, but then in that exhibit, it also said, I saw the 36 one, but it also said a 12-month threshold. So I didn't know if that was going to be something that the subsidy would be held to. I think the schedule that we're looking at definitely has us on track for a 36-month schedule for being ready for sale, but not necessarily can confirm that we would have permits within 12 months of the June reservation. So just wondering if that's if that's
Lyft doesn't-
a threshold item or not.
Lyft doesn't have that requirement. I think you're talking about the non-CLT development subsidies.
Yeah.
Okay, Talia, can you answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're modeling a lot of that off of what you do under Lyft. So I think that for now is mostly to us an indicator that you will be on track to complete the project by 36 months. It's not a hard and fast. You won't be penalized if you're not completely built ready by 12 months.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, Talia, do we still need an extension on that from legislature, because the HDUC funds were supposed to run out, and if we still need that extension, when is that plan to be complete?
Yeah, so our plan is so one of the reasons why we had to get the pre-application data sooner, and I think internally people felt confident with the pre-application data that we could make a case to the legislature in an early session bill that we will be able to utilize all the funds if they extend beyond the biennium. So I don't have exact timing on when that early session bill will go before the legislature. But I know I've said this before, so I'm not sure how much weight it really carries, but we are optimistic that it will pass, and we'll have permission to extend beyond the biennium and also shuffle around general funds to the set asides that need it. So I think the bill will likely be late February, early March, but I don't have a date yet.
Okay, in that interest, it would be kind of nice to know that before we submit a final application and pay the application fee. So ideally, it would extend the deadline to submit applications would extend to after that is complete.
Yeah. Well, let me see now that things are moving and the session has started. Our agency is doing a lot of presenting to the legislature right now on the status of our general funds. So I can see if there's any more updates on timing, and yeah, your comment, I recorded it. I'm not sure that we will be able to change based on that timing. But perhaps we could come up with some kind of agreement that if it's not, if for some reason we don't get the extension and these funds aren't viable to use, then we would return the funds. But I just really doubt that will happen. So, but yes, we could follow up with some more information on timing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, if there aren't questions, and feel free to raise your hand if you think of another one, but two questions for you all. One is, would you be interested in another just office hours like this in a month from now, or I guess it would be before like mid-February? Would that be helpful? You'll be further along in your applications.
Talia, I think so, because I think there's a little bit of confusion about what is absolutely needed for this app and what is something we can put off until closing. And so that nuance is very important. I know we have an opportunity to ask questions, and we're probably going to need to know some of this stuff before, because most of us are just swimming in applications right now. Because this isn't the only one. You've got OHCS has got other, like two, or if not three, plus Business Oregon did their whole DPA and other business related, really right on top of this. So it's just been, it's a very challenging time for all of us. And we want to stay positive and calm and cool and collected. We need to, we need real clarity in terms of what's required at this stage and what isn't. And so we can really focus on what needs to get done. I have a couple questions on capacity building, but I'm going to wait until you kind of kick off that conversation.
Okay, well, that kind of segues into my next question of, do folks want to stay around to have a capacity building specific conversation? Okay, so if people are not applying to capacity building funds and aren't interested in this conversation, feel free to jump off. Otherwise, I don't think we need to have a separate breakout or anything. We could just all stay here and focus on that application and that topic. So feel free to, Diane, you want to start with your questions?
I just as soon defer to other people for a few minutes. I don't mean to dominate. If other people have burning questions, I've got one that's important, but happy to. Maybe this will stimulate some questions. So we know that this is a really important element. It's a little tricky to have it embedded in this particular lift at NOFA. I don't know if anybody else agrees, because it's really different than the lift NOFA. So, and others are separate. So I'm a little, we're trying to keep track of everything. But development capacity is something as we've told you about, and obviously the state's responded with this opportunity. What I'm curious about is, to what extent, again, do we want to leverage builders and developers with with the deep experience and the balance sheets that tend to really attract financing and all that kind of thing? Can this capacity building grant really promote the partnerships that end up giving us the capacity to support builders and developers? Not to say we aren't interested in building probably smaller scale projects in the future, and if we had the capacity, we could consider doing that, and we have some experience with pre-development. But I'm wondering if the capacity building from it is designed to promote the kind of partnerships that just produce units in every way possible and gives us the staff capacity to bring some really critical elements to the table so that we can make sure they're affordable, for example.
Yeah. I mean, without knowing more of the details, that sounds like exactly what we want these funds to be used for.
This is Adam Briggs speaking. I wanted to ask where Proud Ground is located, but I also wanted to ask in the question Diane was just posing, what were some examples of what she was speaking about bringing in additional people to do what was it, construction crews or anyway, can you please elaborate a little more?
Adam, are you down in, did you say you're in Curry?
Yeah, I'm down in Brookings.
I'm going down to the housing summit on Monday.
Oh yeah, good.
I don't know if you're going to be there, we should talk, because we can,
Sure.
I can certainly talk to you about the partnerships between nonprofits and private developers is becoming a really crucial. I mean, we all need to know that private developers produce 95% of all housing units in the state. So how do we get them in on creating much more and much deeper affordability? So that and I'm glad to hear that Talia's, it's not that we have to build every unit ourselves independently, but that we need to team up in ways that produce units effectively. So happy to talk to you, Adam, when I get down to, I think I'm North Bend on Monday.
Great. So I did have a question for Talia, though, if I may. It was about and when we get into the full application, I'm just imagining that for just capacity building only, asking for funds for capacity building, kind of have it compartmentalized in my mind, how much would be for consulting fees, how much for, architectural fees and I don't know if we'd get into engineering on conceptual, I guess. So I have some ideas of how I would use the money to be ready to pounce on a project and get it going. But does Oregon Housing Community Services have some vision themselves on how best they'd like to see the funds utilized, and therefore, how might we best be asking for them? With respect to consulting, I will be also meeting a consultant at the housing summit there in Coos Bay, and I'm hoping to get a quote for X amount of hours of service, so I could present that in the application. Okay, well, here's what I'm asking for to help. But anyway, it's all a little vague to me. Looking for more information.
Yeah, I mean, I think talking to Diane about what she is, some examples of what she's thinking, and hearing from other applicants might make this a little more tangible, because all I can really say is, our priorities are getting building the pipeline of developers and developments or projects, so that we can really scale up production of homes for purchase. And the same tier priority is also just centering communities of color in the design of their housing, or centering communities in that have been underserved in the homeownership rates in Oregon, just centering them in the design and building of their own housing. So just projects that really are showing us that they align with those priorities are what's important. And Sarah, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, I guess. And I know they have been addressed in the FAQ, so I apologize if this is repetitive, but I just wanted to get a little more clarity. So, so for this opportunity, you're looking at, organizations that are newer or emerging and getting started. In the Network for Habitat, there are established affiliate developers who have been doing this for a long time, but they're very small and they have very limited capacity. So they're building like one house per year. So we were a little surprised to see that under eligible activities, there was nothing that was talking about staffing up or hiring, because what they're hoping to do is, for example, maybe someone has a part-time construction manager and they want to bring that person up to full-time. Or in one case, they're looking to actually hire a director of operations because the executive director does everything. So, and so they don't necessarily have a pipeline of new projects that they're hoping to do. They're really just trying to go from building like 1 or 2 units per year to maybe 5. So what I'm writing for the LIFT application or the HDIP application is really the capacity building piece would be supporting those projects, but I also understand this is like a standalone project. So I don't know if that's makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you can likely show, as you said, that if they do have the capacity, if they do have the funds to hire someone, then they will be able to not only successfully complete the project that they're applying for, but move from doing 1 home a year to 5 homes a year. And I think that's the kind of information that we'd be looking for. And as well as how that new staff member will be sustained beyond the initial influx of beyond the initial grant, because we want this to be a sustainable shift. If
that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
In that vein, this is a really important step in the right direction, by the way, just giving us the opportunity to bring in more expertise. So many of our centers are, HUD certified counseling and real estate agent. I mean, we're doing so much just to, help match homes and families and units and subsidy, that that given the low inventory in the state, it just makes a huge difference. And as much as I sound like I might be a little edgy about timing and and some of the issues that we're up against here, this one, and also the homeownership support services application that was so simple and so direct and retroactive, is a huge boost and potentially for us and for I hope a whole lot of us. And I'm just appreciative of those opportunities. On top of, you know, we came close to losing lift for home ownership, and this is and the supplemental funds are huge. On top of the, you know, the part that doesn't have anything to do with permanent affordability, which is it's comprehensively, it's just extraordinary. And I know we're all kind of suffering through the kind of devil's in the details of all of it, but I am, you know, feeling very grateful about the state's you know, efforts here.
Yeah, I wanted to echo that as well. Particularly the capacity building side. There's so many organizations out there that this could be a catalyst for production that ordinarily wouldn't happen.
Thanks for that positive feedback. Yeah, and you know, we can only keep improving these things if when we hear from you all. And so hopefully this pre-development and capacity building, I know some of it is vague, and that's also because we're learning from you all. So as we kind of continue these conversations, we can better shape things, given that also we are constrained by what some of the funding sources allow us to do. So so I guess we will be continuing this conversation as we know more about what funding we receive in the next session. And we will, our plan is to, you know, and I think we shared this in another conversation, to really be meeting with everyone early on once we know what we have, and having these similar conversations about like, how do we best shape it? So yeah.
I have just a technical question. For the pre-dev and capacity building, are the only two attachments outside of the narrative are the budget and the audits, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And I see this.
And those would be, I assume, their PDF format is fine.
Yeah. And for the budget, you can use any format for your project, you know, just showing income or sources and expenses or uses. There's a question, about the application fee. There's no application fee for the pre-development and capacity building grant application.
Talia, it's Adam Briggs again. I had a question. If you can't really speak to what might be inclusive, you know, generally inclusive of the capacity building grant application, can you, if not at the moment, would it be too much to ask to print a list of what would be excluded? You know, a list of exclusions so that you know not to bark up the wrong tree on your application?
We can think about that. You can also email us at our, you know, the contact email if you want to run by a use of, you know, something that you're thinking about for use of the funds, and we can tell you whether it aligns with the guidelines for the funds. It might be a little hard to come up with a list of exclusions, but we can have an internal conversation about that.
Okay, thanks. I still wanted a little clarity if the capacity building grant is meant to be specific to a singular project, or perhaps you know, as many as 3 as far as potential projects that you would, endeavor to get off the ground, but you wouldn't know quite yet until the available property is revealed. Whether it's commercially zoned, for maybe mixed use, or it's residentially zoned, or, it all comes down to price and availability on land, on what you might do. So is there a limit to, again, I'm still wondering on how to structure the application so that it fits the mold.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good question. It can be for, the use case that Sarah described earlier, kind of, that is a strategy that applies to a particular project and future projects. I think we would like to see specifics. The state isn't going to just like offer kind of unconditional funding for a potential project down the line. We want to, know exactly what it's going to be used
So-
for and how that will meet the priorities, but it can apply to multiple projects.
So it sounds like there has to be some degree of site control,
No,
what you're-
I don't think so.
but there's
I'm-
so much subjectivity in not knowing what land you're going to build on. I don't know how to close the gap between those two.
So like another example could be that you're working with specific community members to work on a design for a project. That doesn't mean that the place has to be chosen. Or, the example that Diane mentioned of building up partnerships that, promote, that can lead to promotion of homeownership among underserved populations in your area, that eventually lead to a construction project. So site control doesn't need to be in hand by the time of application. We just need specifics about what you're going to do with the funds.
So I'm really glad Adam and Sarah kind of teased out the nuance of this, because this is important. Because clearly the state wants outcomes, and Adam says, and others, we get offered, discounted or mission oriented. We got churches that are approaching us. We've got, got this land, and this one might work out. This one might not. This one is developable. This one isn't. We've got a builder for this one, but we don't for that. There's a lot of factors in what ends up becoming a real project, and it takes pre-development and pre-assessment of things like the site and how developable it is and what the zoning is and all the, is it on a flood zone? All these issues have got to be teased out. And I think what we're, anticipating is the capacity to be able to do that is going to lead to, 4 potential projects or 2 this coming year. And this is what they could look like. But to nail down specifics would be really hard to do, because it could be this one or it could be that one. So I think that's an important nuance of the questions. And I get wanting the outcomes, because we think we're going to produce outcomes, obviously, through these partnerships, but it's going to be hard to know which one.
No, and I think that this part of the funding being vague, as Talia calls it, allows for a continuum of different asks or requests for funding. And so let me chime in on the same issue, but from a little bit slightly different perspective. And Talia, I wanted to confirm this. You have pre-development, there's capacity building. My question would be, for instance, there could be an organization that just wants to do capacity building. They don't have any capacity. They want to build the capacity. And that could just be a standalone focused application with no project necessarily identified, correct? Or with no prospect currently in mind.
Yes, yeah, capacity building is, obviously very different than pre-development work, because there's a site and very specific activities involved in pre-development. capacity building is a little bit more of a nebulous category and still needs to relate back to how it will lead to increased housing production, but
Right.
it doesn't need to be
Tied
immediately tied.
to an immediate project.
Yeah.
Or it could, for instance, just be increasing an FTE and the training with the goal of production being X, Y, or something. And then the secondary question on this is, which is probably you'll see more of, I think, is people essentially, it's acceptable to apply for both pre-development for a prospective project that is in a very early stage, perhaps due diligence work, as well as capacity building related to for that organization to be able to execute that project. And to some degree, I don't know if that would require two budgets, one for capacity building and one for project. What is your thoughts on that?
That's
Or
a
just
good
maybe
question.
different sections of the budget?
Yeah, I think that would make sense. Different sections and one budget. I think the more that you can consolidate things into one document, the easier it is for our reviewers. But yeah, if you're doing the application and it seems like it merits completely different budgets, then we don't have a hard and fast rule about that.
In terms of response word count, I think all of us, well, I think myself, let me just speak for that, is that I tend to write up to the limit. And I'm not sure that's really a good practice. I guess I'd like to hear what your expectations are relative to how much to include or what what's the guidance really mean when it says 300 words? Is it like, well, you need to at least have 250, or is it like, no, you want it succinct and clear, whatever that is?
Yeah, great question. We don't have any expectations around filling that word count. We really just want to see that people are answering the questions. We don't need like background information about the housing crisis in Oregon. Like, we know that that's happening. We want to hear specifics about your project. And so just however much it takes you to answer the question, we're not judging based on length, we're judging based on like comprehensive answer. And we do, if the pre-applications all come in, we do have kind of a record amount of applications that we're reviewing. So we want you to be thorough, but you won't get points deducted if it is not up until that limit at all. I think people will appreciate a succinct response.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for these really great questions. Keep the questions coming in through the inbox and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. And we will also schedule another time to chat and have a similar session mid-February. So good to see everyone. And Jeremy, do you have a quick question before we close?
I do. It keeps coming in my head. I have to ask it. Do you have an idea what reporting is going to look like for the capacity building and pre-development? Or is that something that's still to be determined? I would assume that the reporting and basic principles of the development subsidies program are going to look similar to LIFT and the other OHCS programs. But the capacity building side, I'm curious what the follow-up and the outcomes are going to be from that.
Yeah, that's an easy question to answer. There's in the NOFA, there are some templates of what the reports will look like. so we'll be requiring biannual reports and then a final report. So the biannuals will just be progress, like mostly what have you done? What challenges have you encountered? What's next? The final report will ask for some more specific outcomes, but the applicant can define what outcomes they are reporting on. So yeah, it's like some of the last exhibits in the NOFA, and it's not guaranteed to be the exact template, but it will give you an idea of what we're asking for.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm
Appreciate
sure
you.
we'll be talking to some of you again soon, and good luck with working on your NOFA and application. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.